Hey, everybody. It is Tuesday, October 29th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Jill, neither of us own a cat, but today is National Cat Day, which is meant to promote the adoption of cats. So happy Cat Day, National Cat Day, I should say, to all of you around the country. Celebrate your cat. Give them some extra snacks today.
I feel like cats have really had a moment in these past few years.
Cat ladies? Is it because of the campaign thing? Or
maybe, I don't know. I feel like cats are cool, Moshe.
Cool cat. Well, I consider you a cool cat. Jill, I should note, we're going to put a link in the show notes. You might have seen this on Instagram and our newsletter, but Mo News has a partnership with the Yale University. We're doing a survey on emotions and feelings and sentiment going into this election. That's exactly what we're trying to capture. Trying to get a diverse range of opinions, gender, age, political opinions, how you're feeling right now. That's really what we're trying to gauge. This is with Mark Brackett, who runs the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. He really dives into how we feel, expectations, results. And so he's going to be on with us after the election to go through the results here. And so we're really, again, trying to take the pulse, if you will, of all of you. So take our survey. It should take no longer than 8 minutes. We've gotten some great feedback so far. People who took the survey so far, Jill, on Instagram say, actually, it was calming and healthy for me to take that survey and think about my feelings about this election. So again, the link in the show notes, and we'll have the results for you in just a week's time.
That's right, Moshe. The only poll about the election that is actually therapeutic. You're welcome.
That's exactly right. We're really just trying to make you guys feel better through the process of asking these questions.
Okay, now we may not make you feel better. Here are the headlines.
At least for the beginning. We have some fun stuff at the end.
1 week until Election Day, both sides address the fallout from Donald Trump's Madison Square Garden rally and the controversial joke about Puerto Rico that Democrats hope will turn more Latino voters in their favor, and Republicans are trying to distance themselves from. An investigation is launched into the burning of mail-in ballots in Oregon and Washington. Moshe, this is the story where I was looking at the video and just thought, okay, we've officially all lost our minds. For real. I mean, it's pretty scary.
Yeah, the feds have launched an investigation. We'll tell you about the latest there.
Both sides campaigning on the issue of lowering inflation, what economists are saying about their plans and what it could mean for prices. An update from McDonald's on that E. Coli outbreak. Yesterday, we told you about the Washington Post's controversial decision to cancel their endorsement of Kamala Harris. We'll tell you what Washington Post subscribers are doing about it. And we're just about 2 days away from Halloween, what China is doing to police Halloween costumes this year.
Like many things in China, the government there making things not so fun.
Plus, Moshe is on this day in history.
Jill will tell you about a birthday for one of the most iconic commercials of the 1990s.
Commercials, something kids these days will know nothing about.
Yeah, I remember when my nephew was much younger, he's in high school now, like getting visibly upset when forced to watch regular television with commercials. And he's like, no, I want the content. We're like, no, you need to sit through commercials on live television. It's a thing that your parents once had to do.
Kids these days. All right, let's start with our top story. As we wake up this morning, 7 days until the election day, both candidates are in their final sprint. Democrats moved quickly yesterday to focus on the fallout from Donald Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden. We told you about it yesterday. Specifically, the stand-up comedian who spoke at the rally and made a number of disparaging jokes, including calling Puerto Rico a, quote, island of garbage. Harris's campaign held a news conference in Philadelphia where Puerto Rican leaders expressed outrage at the remarks from podcast host and comedian Tony Hinchcliffe, known as Kill Tony. A Democratic super PAC was texting hundreds of thousands of Puerto Rican voters in Pennsylvania to make sure that they saw that clip from the rally. And the Harris campaign was also preparing to launch a new ad related to the remarks in a state where as many as 500,000 voters of Puerto Rican heritage are expected to vote. So for those who have not heard the line yet, here is the joke, if you want to call it, as performed by Hinchcliffe.
A lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico. Okay. All right. Okay. We're getting there.
Jill, if you haven't seen it, you heard it there, but really didn't go well. The joke bombed in the room, along with a number of his other jokes as part of his 11-minute set at Sunday's rally. Even he got uncomfortable there as the crowd was not feeling it.
He made jokes about Palestinians, about Jews.
He
brought him?
He mocked Hispanics for failing to use birth control. He called out a black man in the audience with a reference to a watermelon. I mean, this guy was really going after, the sort of bottom of the barrel ethnic race and religion jokes there. And I'm sure there's some finger pointing going on inside the Trump campaign. There was a report from the Bulwark newsletter that apparently he was planning to go further. He was planning to call Kamala Harris the C word, and that was caught by the campaign. But some of these other jokes apparently not caught or not thought to be a thing by campaign officials. Remember, he was on teleprompter, but he ad-libbed a number of jokes. So there's a lot of back and forth going on inside the campaign right now.
Trump's team scrambled to contain the backlash and direct attention to other topics. Campaign spokesperson Caroline Leavitt saying that Hinchcliffe made a, quote, joke in poor taste, but she said the crowd didn't mind and suggested that the episode was overblown. J.D. Vance also chimed in.
Again, I haven't seen the joke. Maybe it's a stupid racist joke, as you said. Maybe it's not. I haven't seen it. I'm not going to comment on the specifics of the joke. But I think that we have to stop getting so offended at every little thing in the United States of America. I'm so over it. Can we all just take a chill pill and take a joke from time to time? This is ridiculous.
Moshe, the 90s called.
they want the term chill pill back. I haven't heard that in so long. But J.D. Vance, millennial, using the term chill pill, like we all did back in high school. Take a chill pill, Mom.
Genuinely I'm having flashbacks to my brother saying that to my mom in high school. My God. Oh my.
Can everyone just take a chill pill, okay?
Anyway, the politics of this is that the campaigns are basically trying to use anything to their advantage, especially in these closing days. Some Democrats have worried throughout this election season about losing the support of some Latino voters, even as polls show that a majority of them support Harris. But they have been trending red in recent elections, especially in Florida, in the Venezuelan, Cuban, and increasingly Puerto Rican communities.
Yeah, so Florida, pretty red at this point, but there's Latinos all across the country. In Pennsylvania, the focus yesterday, you mentioned the press conference in Philadelphia. About 6% of the voting population there is Latino, half of them Puerto Rican. It's a state, Pennsylvania, 19 key electoral votes, probably the biggest state. It might come down to Pennsylvania in the end. And it could come down to tens of thousands of voters, again, in Pennsylvania. So 600,000 Latino voters, a number of them Puerto Rican, could play a major role here, and campaigns are playing to every potential avenue. So it was a 6-hour rally yesterday, and the thing that the campaign right now is pointing to is that comedian who appeared several hours before Trump yesterday at the rally, but of course he had the Trump logo below him. What is notable, Jill, is the Trump campaign is not known for distancing themselves, apologizing for anything. They usually double down on things. So the fact that you mentioned the campaign spokesperson, called it a joke in poor taste, pretty significant by Trump standards, which shows you that inside, a campaign that has a philosophy of never apologizing, sort of kind of apologizing there, though, again, J.D. Vance said everyone needs to take a chill pill on all of this. And it goes to show you had a number of Republicans who were very quick to criticize the joke. That included the senator from Florida, Rick Scott, a big Trump supporter, who went on X immediately to condemn it. Puerto Ricans, a major constituency in Florida. So effectively, people say, what's the big deal here? And the reason why we cover news a certain way here is because it is news. It is news when a campaign has to condemn something. It's a news when there's a reaction. It's a news when people in the party are like, oh, this is bad. And that's why we're covering this compared to other things. Now, that said, how much of an impact this will have, unclear at this juncture. But as you mentioned, literally anything that happens in these final days that can move votes, a few votes here or there, especially as about 10 to 15% of voters still not sure what they're going to do. They're still movable. Well, campaigns are going to make sure that you hear everything bad about the other side.
By the way, we've been talking about endorsements after the rally and that joke. J-Lo and Bad Bunny, who both, I believe, are of Puerto Rican descent, came out to reinforce their endorsement of Kamala Harris.
Yeah, lots of followers online. Also, Ricky Martin. Remember Ricky Martin? He also went online. Ricky Martin, by the way, a follower of here at Mo News.
Ricky Martin's actually in a popular show on Apple right now. Remember Ricky Martin.
Remember, speaking of the 90s, Ricky Martin may have used the term chill pill at some point.
Listen, you know me. Any chance to talk about the 90s?
On this date in history, chill pill was used for the first time.
And sticking with the election here, to the swing state of Pennsylvania, we are tracking early voting numbers there. Fewer voters in that critical battleground state have cast ballots so far than they did in 2020. This is according to data released Monday by the Pennsylvania Department of State. A major difference from that pandemic-era election in 2020. So with the state's deadline for requesting an absentee or mail-in ballot today, Pennsylvania voters had returned about 1.4 million ballots as of Monday morning. That's slightly more than half of the 2.6 million that were completed before Election Day in the 2020 cycle. Republicans, likely responding to Trump's urging to vote early and a statewide turnout campaign funded largely by Elon Musk, make up a greater share of early voters statewide during this election cycle versus last time around. Early ballots completed by Republicans account for 31% of all ballots cast so far. They were 25% in 2020. Democrats are still dominating about 58% of the early vote, but their share of the early turnout appears to have dipped from 63% in 2020. The shift from early voting and the growing Republican participation align with national trends as Trump has embraced early voting this time around.
Yeah, you might remember back in 2020, he said early voting's corrupt. You just got to show up on election day. Some people around him said that was a big mistake. Might be one of the reasons you lost by such a slim margin in 2020. So this time around, early vote. In fact, at Madison Square Garden on Sunday, big up on the main board there, up on the scoreboard in the arena, was early vote because that started in New York this week. So he's fully embraced it this go around. About 40 million Americans as of this taping on Monday evening have early voted in a number of states. Jill, that could be almost 25. Now we're approaching 30% of voters early voting. Pretty much everybody in the country has had a chance or is currently eligible for early voting, except those of you in Mississippi, Alabama, and New Hampshire. You have to vote on Election Day in those states. Among those who early voted, President Biden yesterday in Delaware. Sort of cute moment. Remember him, by the way, President Biden, Jill?
Oh, yeah, the guy who's in charge of leading the free world.
Right, the guy who's in charge, but then since he's dropped out in July, we're like, we don't really cover him as much anymore. People are like, oh, I forgot about that guy. Anyway, he's out there. He early voted, but apparently behind the scenes, there's some drama going on because he thought he was going to be out there campaigning with Kamala Harris. She has not invited him to campaign with her. They have not been together for weeks. And she has no plans to be seen with President Biden, whose approval levels are now below 40%. And she's had trouble dealing with the fact that she's Biden's vice president. She wants credit for the achievements of the administration. She wants nothing to do with the pain points of the administration, like the border, Afghanistan, etc. So apparently, according to Axios, Biden cleared his schedule. He was ready to go out with her to campaign. And he hasn't gotten the phone call. They said, we'll be in touch. They have not been in touch. Sort of like, when you're dating somebody and you're interested and then you're, waiting for that call, waiting for that next date.
He's getting ghosted. He's the president of the United States, and he's being ghosted by the vice president.
He's being ghosted.
It's usually the other way around, right? Usually it's the vice president who can't get any airtime.
For once, he's like, wait, I stepped down for you. I've let you become the nominee for the party. And my reward is that I vote by myself early in Delaware. And he did an event in New Hampshire, safer blue states right now, because he's just frankly not popular. So senators don't want to campaign with him. The vice president doesn't want to campaign with him. She has the Obamas out there. So she's focused right now on a couple Democratic presidents, but they're named President Obama and President Clinton. Not so much President Biden out there. So FYI, Biden's available this week if any of you have any plans.
I feel like literally, like, invite him to a school assembly. He'll come.
Yeah. Especially if you're in a swing state, he'll get out there. He'll talk to you. I kid. He will be doing some events independently, but again, not appearing, at least not so far.
Presidents, they're just like us. They get ghosted. I just anecdotally on the issue of early voting, which opened up in New York this week, my parents went to go vote early, and they said the line was wrapped around the block at the library, and my mom, and they didn't wait because they said they'll go back another time, but they said it's crazy out there.
Well, you guys have a number of competitive races out there on Long Island. Well, one competitive race in particular, but a couple other races around New York State. Jill, the future of the U.S. House. We talked about this in the election survival series over for the premium members late last week. But the road to the House, so House majority for either Democrats or Republicans, for both parties, could go through California and New York. So two very blue states, at least on the presidential level, but at the congressional level, a number of swing districts that effectively, depending on how they go, most districts have about 600,000 people who live in them, could dictate whether it's Speaker Hakeem Jeffries or Speaker Mike Johnson again.
Yeah, in 2022, when there was this red wave expected across the entire country, it pretty much just happened on Long Island. I mean, that was pretty much where there was a red wave. 4 of the congressional seats went to Republicans. 1 was Santos. He's now out. And so 1 has flipped to Democratic. But yeah, there's a couple of close races here on Long Island that we'll be watching that could potentially determine, as you said, the fate of the House.
One of the reasons Trump was in New York over the weekend, he knows that his presence here may boost Republican turnout and then help him have a Congress that is also Republican. Jill, one big speech we'll be looking out for today, Kamala Harris on the National Mall, on the Ellipse, actually. That's the area between the White House and the National Mall. Incidentally speaking, in the same spot that Donald Trump spoke from on January 6, 2021. So she'll be making that as part of her final arguments there, invoking what happened on January 6th, drawing a line there. The hope from the campaign is that it'll help to continue to swing anybody who's left, independents, et cetera, worried about democracy, her direction. So we'll look out for those remarks. But we talked about early voting here. One concerning incident, a couple concerning incidents actually out in the West Coast that we're watching. The FBI right now investigating the burning of ballot drop boxes in Washington State, in Oregon, in the early hours on Monday. Hundreds of ballots were burned in the city of Vancouver. This is Vancouver, Washington State. That's about 10 miles from Portland. That's where the other fire was set. The 2 drop boxes affected were about 15 miles apart. Police suspect they're connected, and a vehicle involved in the incident has been identified. We put up some of the video here. On Instagram yesterday. Authorities there saying that if you placed ballots in the drop boxes, at least the drop box in Washington, after 11 a.m. on Saturday, you should contact the office to confirm the status of the ballots, and some of the ballots survived. And then they'll give you a chance to potentially fill out a ballot. And this comes as there was an incident down in Arizona recently where a U.S. Postal Service mailbox containing a small number of ballots was also set afire. They arrested somebody, a 35-year-old man who admitted to it, said it wasn't politically motivated, which I guess implies he was either like a pyro or, not altogether there.
All right, time for the speed read from the Wall Street Journal. The 2.5-year fight to bring inflation down appears to be succeeding, but this election could change that. As we've been talking a lot on this podcast about inflation, it has fallen. That's mostly because of higher interest rates. Also, supply chains have gotten a lot better. There's also been an influx of workers. But whether prices continue to ease next year could turn heavily on policy choices by Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. Both candidates support policies to boost growth that could keep inflation from falling any further and reaching the Fed's target of 2%. The Wall Street Journal reports that economists and even conservative-leaning advisors worry that the ideas backed by Trump risk stoking the embers of inflation. Those include his proposals to slap across-the-board tariffs on imported goods, to deport workers, and to lean on the Fed to lower interest rates. Moreover, a second Trump term would unfold against a much different economic backdrop than his first one, when price pressures had been low and stable for many years. In recent days, bond yields have risen on expectations that Trump will win the presidency and that his new term would bring higher deficits, inflation, or both.
Yeah, so the theory there is that his policies will bring higher inflation despite campaigning on lower inflation, and then they'll have to raise interest rates again in order to potentially deal with that. Remember, inflation, we've talked about this in the past, especially when it was sort of at its peak, is driven by global forces, not by individual presidents, at least not that much. During Trump's term, there was the overhang of the 2008 global financial crisis, so that kept demand and price pressures subdued globally. So we were still dealing with like record low interest rates there through most of that decade, etc. Then you saw inflation start to soar here in the US and more than 150 countries around the world in the aftermath of COVID, as the US and other countries opened up, or reopened up, I should say, the pandemic. Now, of course, there was that strong demand as all the countries opened up. Prices started to increase there. We had ultra low interest rates at the time. And then there were the stimulus plans, the two under Trump and then the one under Biden that was seen as inflationary. But at the same time, there were others that thought that that would prevent a depression or recession. Now, in retrospect, it looks like that last one did boost inflation a bit. So the Fed has engaged in a multi-year effort to lower. So the Fed has engaged in a multi-year effort to raise interest rates to try to then lower inflation. They've declared success on that recently. Now the question is, how will the Harris plans and the Trump plans potentially impact inflation? Harris, they see right now, and this is even among conservative economists, that it will relatively remain stagnant. It might go up a little bit, but for the most part, she is less likely to have a Congress behind her because Dems might take the House, but right now the Senate is very much looking Republican, which shows we could have split government. So unclear how much of her plans will go through. Trump still has the opportunity here for a trifecta. If he wins the White House, the Senate's looking in his favor, and the House is super, super close, and they have a majority right now. So in that scenario, Trump could pass through a number of his plans. That includes the extension of his tax cuts. That includes, support there, potentially funding support for his deportations. And then tariffs, his tariff plan, he can do that independently without Congress. So the feeling among economists is, their analysis is, that the deportation of low-wage workers who won't get replaced by American workers who don't want those low-wage jobs, companies will then scale back production because their workers are gone. Businesses will shrink, and then fewer higher-paid Americans will have jobs. They'll lose jobs because of the decreased production there. So there's one potential impact there. The Peterson Institute, that's a nonpartisan institute that does analysis here, estimates that deporting illegal immigrants would reduce economic output while boosting inflation. The idea here is that we would see increased wages here, and ultimately prices would then go up. Overall, there is an analysis, again, from another nonpartisan group, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. That's a group that advocates for deficit reduction. Their analysis right now, their middle analysis, is that Kamala Harris will add $3.5 trillion to the deficit over the coming decade. Donald Trump will add $7.5 trillion to the deficit, and we've gone from just $1 trillion and change to more than $35 trillion deficit over the course of the past 20 years. And that's on everyone's watch. Bush's watch, Obama's watch, Trump's watch, and Biden's watch.
From Fox Business, McDonald's is returning Quarter Pounders back to the menu nationwide after hitting pause on the sale of the hamburgers at some locations because of an E. coli outbreak. At least 75 people in 13 states have been sickened, about 20 hospitalized, and one person has died from the illness. It comes after beef was ruled out as the source of contamination linked to the sandwiches. McDonald's said it was informed over the weekend by the Colorado Department of Agriculture that the agency had completed its testing of beef patties from restaurants in the state and found no detection of E. coli. McDonald's has now told its beef suppliers to resume making the fresh patties and expects that Quarter Pounders will be available again at all stores over the coming week. However, the slivered onions that are on the Quarter Pounders will still not be available as a topping in the locations impacted by the outbreak.
I'll take my Quarter Pounder. No onions, please. The FDA is investigating whether Taylor Farms, which supplied the onions to McDonald's, is the source of the contamination. That's their belief. There's other restaurants that were getting their onions from them as well that have since pulled them from their menus. That includes Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, KFC. All of them, a number of their locations, have pulled them out of caution here. Impacted McDonald's locations, Colorado, Kansas, Wyoming. Talked about that out in the Mountain West. as well as a number of states that are in the Southwest.
From NPR, a follow-up to the story about the Washington Post owner Jeff Bezos quashing their opinion page's planned endorsement of Kamala Harris. While he's facing more resignations in his newsroom over this intervention, there has also been a massive departure of subscribers. More than 200,000 people had canceled their digital subscriptions by midday Monday. Not all cancellations take effect immediately. Still, the figure represents about 8% of the paper's paid circulation of 2.5 million subscribers. The number of cancellations continued to grow Monday afternoon.
Yeah, Joel, we might be talking about 10% of subscribers here. The number goes up. Though we learned late Monday night why Jeff Bezos, the owner of the Washington Post, made his decision, he revealed it in, where else? The Washington Post, in an opinion piece with the headline, "The Hard Truth, Americans Don't Trust the News Media." In it, he says that effectively, and we've talked about these numbers before, people now trust the media less than Congress, down there with Congress, which is always infamously the least trusted institution when Americans are polled. And so he writes in his piece in the Post, most people believe that the media is biased. Anyone who doesn't see this is paying scant attention to reality, and those who fight reality lose. Reality is an undefeated champion. Complaining is not a strategy. We must work harder to control what we can control, to increase our credibility. And then the truth here, which we talked about yesterday. Presidential endorsements do nothing to tip the scales of an election. No voter out there is going to look at a newspaper endorsement this day and age and say, I'm going with the newspaper's endorsement. So a perception of non-independence. So what he says is that presidential endorsements do nothing and create a perception of bias, a perception of non-independence. Ending them is a principled decision. We mentioned yesterday there is a separation between news reporters and the opinion page. The lines don't cross, especially at these institutions. That said, the perception is reality in this case. People already don't trust the media. And so what's the point here of these endorsements is effectively his point. He goes back into Washington Post history, back in the day when they didn't do endorsements before the 1970s. And then he addresses the elephant in the room, quid pro quo. Was there a quid pro quo here with Trump? He claims no. He says that he wants to be clear, no quid pro quo, even though there was a meeting between the chief executive of his Blue Origin space company and former President Trump on the day of the announcement. He says he had no idea that meeting was happening. And he says he let out a sigh when he heard about it because he knew that that would create the perception here of bias. Again, this is Bezos' claim. And he says, again, there was no connection there. Now, one former editor at large, Robert Kagan, he's one of the several editors and staffers who have quit the Washington Post in light of this decision, noted that Blue Origin meeting. He claimed, Kagan is his name again, claimed that we're bending the knee to Donald Trump because we're afraid of what he will do if he becomes president again. Again, Bezos, multi-billionaire with a lot of business interests at stake here. And so there you have it from the claims, and there you have it from Bezos.
Well, it's funny because then I heard other people being like, don't take it out on Amazon because then Amazon workers are going to be impacted by it.
Right. But, listen, we're a capitalist system. And so you make your opinion known with your wallet, with your credit card. And so, you have Washington Post reporters are like, we suffer enough here, cuts, et cetera, at the Washington Post. Go take it on Amazon. They can deal with it. But, of course, Amazon has had its own cuts in recent years. Take it out on Blue Origin. Blue Origin. Well, we need new ways to get our astronauts home from space, Jill. You can't leave the astronauts behind either. From CNBC, Apple on Monday released its latest operating system, iOS 18.1, an update that includes the company's artificial intelligence. It says AI stands for Apple Intelligence. Of course it does. It's available for the iPhone 16 and the iPhone 15 Pro. The company also released software updates for iPad and Mac with Apple Intelligence. This release is a critical milestone for Apple, which is relying on the feature launch to power its marketing campaign for the iPhone 16 lineup released last month. Apple Intelligence is limited to start, so the first wave of Apple Intelligence features include writing tools that can proofread or rewrite text. Make me sound happier. Make me sound angrier. New features that can remove objects from photos, and a feature that can summarize a stack of notifications into a single message. That's helpful, Jill. I have like 40 news apps. I'll take that. Right. Like if you happen to pause a group chat and come back on after 5 hours, there could be 75 messages. Yeah. It can summarize that, apparently. Oh, I like that. I like that, Apple Intelligence. Thank you.
Monday's release also includes improvements to Siri, including a new look that makes the entire screen glow around the phone's edges. Kind of a moot point, given that most people have cases, right?
Jill, it's cool. Okay.
Stop trying to nitpick. Okay. The update does not let Siri, though, take actions inside of apps. So that's expected to be another update next year.
Yeah, more and more, you realize with AI, if you use ChatGPT or Perplexity or any of these other AI, how much you can ask, the AI to do for you, to learn about you, and really how behind Siri is by comparison. So Apple has realized here that they really need to upgrade what they do with Siri. Siri, is sort of a non-factor as far as I'm concerned. So we'll see if Siri more and more becomes relevant to my life, becomes helpful. Again, just like tell Jill I'm running late for the podcast taping. Like tell, and let's see if Siri, the new version of Siri, learns me, gets me, understands me.
Tell Moshe my internet's down for the 100th time.
You guys don't know this, the pain we deal with sometimes with Jill's internet connectivity in her home and what that means for podcast tapings. Anyhow, apparently there's also security updates here for 18.1. So that's super important as you worry about hacks, etc. And so right now, a lot of interesting interface things that you'll be able to get if you have an iPhone 15 Pro, iPhone 15 Pro Max, and any iPhone 16 model here. The writing tools, you can apparently highlight chunks of text and choose to rewrite it, and again, in a more friendly, professional, or concise style. And the photo apps has that intelligent search, which I need, Jill, because with all my posting on Instagram, my photos are a mess.
Moshe, I can't even imagine what your phone must look like, the photos.
45,000 slides with stories that I've posted on Instagram.
But I do think that is really helpful because there are times when I want to look for a very specific picture. And I feel like we all have now thousands of pictures on our phone. And so this would be helpful.
Right. Find me the picture with my daughter last Halloween. So I don't have to scroll for it.
I'm also wondering what Siri thinks is friendly, professional, or concise. Like friendly is basically just a lot of exclamation points. This is what I'm guessing they're going to do.
On your sensibility. If you're one of my parents and you send me 27 emojis after something, will Siri learn that? Will they learn your style? Siri, study what I've written to this person over the last year and just mimic that style. We'll see if she's smart enough. This new Siri. This upgraded Siri.
From NBC News, Chinese authorities are putting a damper on Halloween festivities in the authoritarian country. Police in Shanghai were out in force over the weekend to crack down on Halloween festivities amid concerns that revelers would once again turn up in costumes that are considered politically sensitive. So last year, you had huge crowds turning out to celebrate Halloween around Julu Road, which is in the heart of China's financial capital. And it was the first Halloween since China emerged from 3 years of pandemic isolation. Some people dressed up in hazmat suits and other costumes related to COVID and other social and economic issues. Apparently, Moshe, the Chinese government was not into it.
Shocking. The thing that they also are very sensitive about is that people think that Xi Jinping, the leader there, looks like Winnie the Pooh. So if you ever even use a Winnie the Pooh picture, God forbid you should dress up like him, you could, face major wrath, arrests, time in jail there. So definitely probably nobody dressed up as Winnie the Pooh there. But last year, they didn't like the COVID stuff. They're sensitive about the COVID stuff there in China.
So the image that basically every media outlet used to be COVID, it was like a virus with all sorts of things coming out of it.
It was the illustration of the virus, that red circle with the lines.
I feel like you might have had people dressing up like that. That's what I'm picturing.
Well, either way, it ain't happening this year. And Shanghai police have set up makeshift barriers on a number of roads, deterring partygoers from gathering. There hasn't been an official announcement, but in many cases, there isn't in China. But local businesses have reported receiving notices about not operating their bars during Halloween, not holding parties with, quote, bizarre clothing on Halloween. And so there you have it. There was a discussion going on Weibo and Chinese social media. But of course, those conversations have now disappeared as Chinese government censors have entered the chat room. And blocked all that.
All right. Well, the U.S. has its share of problems, but at least we could dress up however we want on Halloween.
For now, Jill, for now. You have no idea what's going to... I mean, I kid, but I mimic some of the political rallies we hear. Do you know what will happen if the other side gets elected? All right. Time for On This Day in History. On this day in 1929, Black Tuesday descended on Wall Street. Prices collapsed amid panic selling, and thousands of investors were wiped out as the Great Depression began on this day in 1929. All right, Jill, your clue was this was a famous 1990s commercial. The Got Milk ad, the first Got Milk ad, aired today on this day 31 years ago.
So when my daughter drinks milk, she gets a milk mustache. And my husband and I are always like, got milk? And she doesn't get it. You know, she laughs that she has a milk mustache.
But do you remember the Aaron Burr ad where like the guy had peanut butter and he was like trying to win $1 million on a game show and he didn't have milk? And so it was another thing, like you got to have milk if you're going to win $1 million. Aaron Burr, because he had too much peanut butter in his mouth and he wanted to win the sweepstakes. Anyway, there's like so many classic. I have to hand it to the Dairy Council back in the 90s, because they convinced all of us that we had to drink milk all the time, right? Like in school, drinking milk, you drink milk with lunch, you drink milk with
for
breakfast.
Your bones, exactly.
But you're having milk with your cereal, like so much milk at dinner. Like, what? You're eating a bowl of cereal with a glass of milk. Like, what was happening in the 90s? Like, they were so successful in convincing us, like, we need so much milk. I think millennials are still damaged from that. Like, I haven't drank a glass of milk in a very long time, but like, do I feel guilty about it? A little bit, yeah.
Wait, when is the last time you've seen anybody actually have milk?
Drink a glass of milk? Like, just like, you know what I'm going to have with dinner tonight? A glass of milk. In the 90s, that was a thing, thanks to the Got Milk campaign. Speaking of TV, on this day in 1998, HD TV, high definition television, was introduced in the US. Another TV moment on this day in 2007, Hulu launched. And a little bit of sports history on this day. On this day in 2003, 21 years ago today, an 18-year-old prodigy out of high school named LeBron James made his premiere for the Cleveland Cavaliers, scoring 25 points. One of the most impressive in league history. Jill, he is still in the NBA 21 years later for the Lakers, and this year playing alongside his son, Briney. And we end here with a bit of music history. On this day in 1965, The Who released My Generation, talking about my generation. That's not My Generation. That'd be a Boomers. I feel like that's a big Boomer song.
Which is why the two of us are just like, we don't really know how it goes.
The Who. I remember there's like The Who's Tommy, right? There's a whole thing. Anyway, one other musical note on this day, 41 years ago, Islands in the Stream, written by the Bee Gees and performed by Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton, went to number one. Jill, Islands in the Stream, a great duet at karaoke.
It is, and I do believe for us 90s kids, Ghetto Superstar, that is what you are, a remake of that song.
Or they sampled the beat. They sampled Islands in the Stream for that. Another fun fact for you, the Bee Gees, actually, the Gibb brothers disagree on who they actually wrote the song for. One of them, I think, says they wrote the song for Marvin Gaye, who actually died a year later. And another one says they wrote the song for Diana Ross originally. Either way, Kenny and Dolly performed it in the end. And Jill, that's what you get here on the Mo News Podcast, a little Islands in the Stream history. I bet you didn't expect that today, folks.
I didn't. And I also didn't expect Take a Chill Pill to make a comeback.
Take a chill pill, listen to Islands in the Stream, and vote, and then see what happens.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Mo News Podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And don't forget to leave us a kind review in the App Store.
And check out the link in the show notes. We want you to take that survey. We want to know how you're doing right now, a week before the election.